Hello, welcome, good morning, bookworms. It's been a while. It's been about a week, but don't you think for a second that I forgot about our persuasion read-alongs? It would take great persuasion for me to forget to do read-alongs. You guys, I am here. I am ready to continue reading Anne Elliot's story. I'm trying not to start the counter too early. But yes, hello everybody. Happy Monday. Happy Mind Day, by the way. Mind days are slowly drawing to an end, you guys. The first week of August, I believe, is our last Mind Day. So, enjoy them. So happy Mind Day, everybody. Happy to see you. And today I see we already have quite a few people chatting. We had early gang already shared comments. We have Akihana, darling, you were the very first one. Congratulations and thank you for your enthusiastic comments. And okay, so Akihana says, I've been rewatching your Blue Castle videos lately, so my mind's full of Barney and Valency. Indeed. So Barney and Valency, you guys, we started recording the chit chat over on my Discord server. If you're not in the Discord server, get your butt in here, become a member. It's only $5 a month, $25 if you want to be a really cool person, but it's only $5 a month and you can join into the chit chat. So we're doing the chit chat recording, but it was like 3 hours and we had barely gotten to, like, you know, the pivotal moments. We didn't actually even get to where Valency announces to her family all about, you know, what she's been doing. So we didn't get to that part. And so we're going to have to do part 2 recording on Wednesday. So that's going to happen Wednesday afternoon, which means that our read-along is going to be also in the morning. So don't worry, I am not planning on forsaking the read-alongs because I have chit-chats. No, we are going to be doing read-alongs on today, Wednesday, and Friday. So yes, I also have my mind full of Barney and Valency. And I hope you share your thoughts with us when we do the chit chat on Wednesday. So anyway, congratulations on being the first. Unfortunately, though, you tell us that you'll be in Schlafterm's embrace when this goes live. I understand time zones doing their thing. So enjoy the rewatch and have sweet dreams. Oh, and also, just want to make sure that I mentioned this. Akihana is the newest member on the Ko-fi, so welcome to the nest, and thank you for your support. And also thank you to the support of all the other bookworms who are members of the Discord server and who support me monthly. I really appreciate it. So who else do we have on the chat? We have Red Tempest. Hello, says Jane Bronte is such a breath of fresh air. Wrong book, Red Tempest, but yes. I mean, Charlotte Bronte just came in and she kind of redefined what was a gothic novel, because I mean she wasn't the very first one to write novels about secrets and insanity and like a little bit of horror. She wasn't the first one. By the time the Victorian era came around, there was already like sensationalism. You had even what's his face, I'm not the biggest fan of him. I don't know why I want to say Charles Darwin. No, Dickens. He also had a little bit of that, not to the same extent, and also he was a little bit later than Jane Bronte. But anyway, Jane Bronte, Charlotte Bronte. So, but yeah, like what she did with the genre was amazing. It was a sensation. So, yeah, she was a breath of fresh air. Jane Eyre was certainly a breath of fresh air. And we will definitely talk about extensively about Jane Eyre when we do our Jane Eyre chit chat. So if you haven't already, do read the Jane Eyre or listen to the read along so you can be all caught up in time for our eventual chit chat. Red Tempest also says we should get a friend to read Jane Austen. They just need a little persuasion. That's right. Persuade your friends to come and read with us. Persuasion. And then Teal, oh my goodness, Teal, I can't believe it. You, man, oh my goodness, I love this. Ostensibly, I'm here. Austin, you guys. Hopefully I garner no antipathy for resting my eyes until I can bath in caffeine this morning. Oh my gosh, Teal, you win today's comment. Look at you, not just one, not two, but 3 puns, and they all are having to do with persuasion. Wow, bravo. Bravo, good job. I love it. Blockshot says, hello everybody, hope you have or had a wonderful Monday and enjoyed this library. I will only listen because I came back late and need to cook dinner and nothing could persuade me otherwise. Welcome Blockshot, I hope you have a nice evening, that you can relax as you persuade dinner, as you prepare dinner. Bon appetit. Noodles Dumplings Kimchi says, hello bookworms, hey. Let's see, it started after 3,000 years. Persuasion read-alongs are back. I know, you guys, I'm sorry, it's been a June and July, it really has been, but I think I'm getting back in the swing of things, so I don't think I'll postpone or cancel read-alongs, hopefully. So Akihana, okay, Noodles Dumplings Kimchi says, I feel you on needing to leave a little early. I need to hop on the treadmill later. Just hop on the treadmill while you're with us. Now I know sometimes though, when you're listening with headphones or whatever and you're on the treadmill, it just doesn't hit the same. So I get it. I hope you enjoy your workout. I will be doing mine later after lunch. Red Tempest says she ended the recording when I was finally able to talk. LOL for Blue Castle. Well, you know what, Red Tempest and everybody listening, I had something terrible happen, you guys. Something absolutely awful happened, you guys. So I don't know why OBS and my computer hates me, but so the recording was almost 3 hours long, and I stopped the recording, and it recorded it, but at the end, like, it was just really trippy, like it was really cutting off. So a lot of the recording on OBS is unusable. And then I was like, that's okay, because I did a backup recording on YouTube. So while we were recording, I was also sending the feed to YouTube on a private or unlisted video, which is still up there, but you guys can't access it. Unfortunately though, out of the 2.5 hours that I broadcasted, only 1 hour and 42 minutes and 36 seconds actually ended up being rendered. So I'm kind of screwed up. We recorded past the wedding scene. We were actually having questions like, ooh, do you guys think they did it? Or, you know, philosophical, important questions. And that got all like, it doesn't exist. It got lost. The only place that it exists, it's in your imagination or in your memories if you were there. So I'm gonna have to go back to, I think, around the time where she proposes to Barney, that we're gonna have to talk about. I am so sorry, you guys. I feel like I need a separate degree to work OBS, says Noodles Dumplings Kimchi. You know what? I'm gonna have to look for an alternative to OBS. Either that or get a new machine. Okay, everybody. How about we start a crowdfunding for a new machine for Magpie? Because I think my Mac is really great. It works. It doesn't lag or anything, but I don't know if it needs more memory because it suffers with OBS. So I don't know, and I don't want to spend money on that because I have so many like expenditures coming up that I don't want to dip into that fund. So Either I find an alternative to OBS or I just deal with it. So I'm just gonna deal with it, and we're gonna re-record, and you guys are just gonna have to like excuse me for my inability to figure out OBS. So anyway, but I don't want to start reading on such a sad note. Let's see what's good to say. Oh, by the way, you guys, I am planning on releasing the Blue Castle Chit Chat for August, because in August it is going to be Ella Montgomery's 150th birthday. So she passed away in the 1940s, early 1940s. So if she had still been alive right now, she would turn 150 years old in August. So I am going to release that for the Blue Castle Chit Chat for August. And you know, I'm so tired of Redbubble being stupid, so I'm also going to release the merch I had planned for so long, and it's ready, it's there, it's just Redbubble's being annoying. So I'm just gonna have to move it over to either my Spreadshirt store or my Spring store. I don't know. I'm sorry, you guys. So anyway, be on the lookout for that. And I do believe it is now time for us to get started with Persuasion. TLDR, what happened in the last Persuasion read along? Anybody remembers? Let's see. Okay, so the TLDR of the last Persuasion chapter, let's see, we have read already several chapters. We have done 3 read-alongs, so we are starting with chapter 7. In chapter 6, we had Anne. Well, she moved over. Okay, let's start from the beginning. If you've never been here to read Persuasion, Jane Eyre is the daughter of a baronet. A baronet who does not know how to spend, who is vain and conceited. He basically is full of debt. So now, what he has to do, he's gonna have to leave his country house, rent it out to some person with money, and then go off to live in a smaller house in the city. All that's fine and good. Unfortunately, though, the person that does end up moving to his house is an Admiral Croft, who is married to a Mrs. Croft. Now, nothing remarkable about the lady except the fact that she has a brother called Frederick Wentworth. And 8 years ago, Frederick Wentworth and Anne, that is Baronet Elliot's middle daughter, they met. They fell deeply and passionately in love, and they got engaged pretty quickly. Unfortunately, though, Anne broke things off because she was made to see that she and Frederick getting married at such a young age would not be wise, not just for her, but also for him, because he still has his career to do. She probably was thinking like, I would just be a hindrance to his career. He'd worry about leaving a young wife at home, and that he would play it safe, stuff like that. So she gave him up. Of course, he did not take that well. Would you? I don't blame him at all. And so he left. So it's been, again, 8 years. Anne is still has feelings for him, but she does not want to see him, and she's kind of like mortified that his sister's gonna live in her house, and there's a danger that he is going to go visit and be around there in the neighborhood. She was hoping that wouldn't be the case, but in the last chapter, chapter 6, she learns that he is indeed going to go visit Kellynch. That is the house where she used to live and where his sister's now living. He is going to go there, and they're going to meet. Whether she wants to or not, she has to face it. They will meet. And today's question is, will they actually meet in this read-along, or will one of them try to put it off and just be like, nope, I'm going to avoid this situation and then leave? Who knows? I don't know. We'll find out. I hope that was clear enough. There's other characters, of course. But you'll get to meet them by and by. All right, let's do this, you guys. Okay. Chapter 7. A very few days more, and Captain Wentworth was known to be at Kellynch, and Mr. Musgrove had called on him, and come back warm in his praise, and he was engaged with the Crofts to dine at Uppercross by the end of another week. It had been a great disappointment to Mr. Musgrove to find that no earlier day could be fixed. So impatient was he to show his gratitude by seeing Captain Wentworth under his own roof, and welcoming him to all that was strongest and best in his cellars. But a week must pass. Only a week in Anne's reckoning, and then she supposed they must meet, and soon she began to wish that she could feel secure even for a week. Captain Wentworth made a very early return to Mr. Musgrove's civility, and she was all but calling there in the same half hour. She and Mary were actually setting forward for the great house, where, as she afterwards learned, they must be inevitably have found him, when they were stopped by the eldest boy's being at that moment brought home in consequence of a bad fall. So she and Mary and everybody else were going to go to the great house, to the Musgroves' place, where Wentworth was going to be at, but a kid fell off the tree or something like that. By the way, this is one of my favorite scenes in one of the adaptations, because Mary goes into hysterics and it's precious. Anyway, the child situation put the visit entirely aside, but she could not hear of her escape with indifference, even in the midst of the serious anxiety which they afterwards felt on his account. His collarbone was found to be dislocated, and such injury received in the back as roused the most alarming ideas. It was an afternoon of distress, and Anne had everything to do at once: the apothecary to send for, the father to have pursued and informed, the mother to support and keep from hysterics, the servants to control, the youngest child to banish, the poor suffering one to attend and soothe. By the way, this is Anne, the aunt, doing all these things. What the heck is Mary doing? She is worthless. Besides sending, as soon as she recollected it, the proper notice to the other house, which brought her an accession rather of frightened, inquiring companions than of very useful assistants. Her brother's return was the first comfort. He could take best care of his wife, and the second blessing was the arrival of the apothecary. Till he came and had examined the child, their apprehensions were worse for being vague. They suspected great injury, but knew not where. But now the collarbone was soon replaced, and though Mr. Robinson felt, and rubbed, and looked grave, and spoke low words both to the father and the aunt, still they were all to hope for the best, and to be able to part and eat their dinner in tolerable ease of mind. And then it was, just before they parted, that the two young aunts were able so far to digress from their nephew's state as to give information of Captain Wentworth's visit, staying 5 minutes behind their father and mother, to endeavour to express how perfectly delighted they were by him, how much handsomer, how infinitely more agreeable they thought him than any individual among their male acquaintance, who had been at all a favourite before. How glad they had been to hear Papa invite him to stay dinner, how sorry when he said it was quite out of his power, and how glad again when he had promised to reply to Papa's and Mamma's further pressing invitations to come and dine with them on the morrow. Actually, on the morrow! And he had promised it in so pleasant a manner, as if he felt all the motive of their attention was just as he ought. And in short, he had looked and said everything with such exquisite grace that they could assure them all their heads would both turn by him. And off they ran, quite as full of glee as of love, and apparently more full of Captain Wentworth than of little Charles. So, dang, the girls came over, absolutely distressed at hearing their little nephew had fallen, but supposedly distressed. But I think they just came over to say their first impressions of Captain Wentworth. I don't know. What do you guys think? The same story and the same raptures were repeated when the two girls came with their father through the gloom of the evening to make inquiries, and Mr. Musgrove, no longer under the first uneasiness about his heir, could add his confirmation and praise and hope. There would be now no occasion of putting Captain Wentworth off, and only be sorry to think that the cottage party, probably, would not like to leave the little boy to give him the meeting. Oh, no! As to leaving the little boy, both father and mother were in much too strong and recent alarm to bear the thought, and Anne, in the joy of the escape, could not help adding her warm protestations to theirs. Charles Musgrove, indeed, afterwards, showed more of inclination. The child was going on so well, and he wished so much to be introduced to Captain Wentworth that perhaps he might join them in the evening. He would not dine from home, but he might walk in for half an hour. But in this he was eagerly opposed by his wife. "Oh, no, indeed, Charles, I cannot bear to have you go away. Only think if anything should happen." The child had a good night and was going on well the next day. It must be a work of time to ascertain that no injury had been done to the spine, but Mr. Robinson found nothing to increase alarm, and Charles Musgrove began, consequently, to feel no necessity for longer confinement. The child was to be kept in bed and amused as quietly as possible. But what was there for a father to do? This was quite a female case, and it would be highly absurd in him, who could be of no use at home, to shut himself up. His father very much wished him to meet Captain Wentworth, and there being no sufficient reason against it, he ought to go. And it ended in his making a bold public declaration, when he came in from shooting, of his meaning to dress directly and dine at the other house. "Nothing can be going on better than the child," said he. "So I told my father just now that I would come, and he thought me quite right. Your sister being with you, my love, I have no scruple at all. You would not like to leave him yourself, but you see I can be of no use, and will send for me if anything is the matter." Husbands and wives generally understand when opposition will be vain. Mary knew, from Charles's manner of speaking, that he was quite determined on going, and that it would be of no use to tease him. She said nothing, therefore, till he was out of the room, but as soon as there was only Anne to hear. "So, you and I are to be left to shift by ourselves with this poor sick child, and not a creature coming near us all the evening. I knew how it would be. This is always my luck. If there is anything disagreeable going on, men are always sure to get out of it, and Charles is as bad as any of them. Very unfeeling. I must say it is very unfeeling to be so running away from his poor little boy. Talks of his being going on so well. How does he know that he is going on well, or that there may not be a sudden change half an hour hence? I did not think Charles would have been so unfeeling. So here he is to go away and enjoy himself, and because I am the poor mother, I am not allowed to stir. And yet I am sure I am more unfit than anybody else to be about the child. My being the mother is the very reason why my feelings should not be tried. I am not at all equal to it. You saw how hysterical I was yesterday." "But that was only the effect of the suddenness of your alarm, of the shock. You will not be hysterical again. I dare say we shall have nothing to distress us. I perfectly understand Mr. Robertson's directions, and have no fears. And indeed, Mary, I cannot wonder at your husband. Nursing does not belong to a man. It is not his province. A sick child is always the mother's property. Her own feelings generally make it so." "I hope I am as fond of my child as any mother, but I do not know that I am any more use in the sick room than Charles, for I cannot be always scolding and teasing the poor child when it is ill. And you saw this morning that if I told him to keep quiet, he was sure to begin kicking about. I have not nerves for this sort of thing." "But could you be comfortable yourself to be spending the whole evening away from the poor boy?" "Yes, you see his papa can, and why should not I?" "Oh my gosh, Mary, you're Oh my gosh, Mary. Jemima is so careful, and she could send us word every hour how he was. I really think Charles might as well have told his father we would all come. I am not more alarmed about little Charles now than he is. I was dreadfully alarmed yesterday, but the case is very different today. Well, if you do not think it too late to give notice for yourself, suppose you were to go as well as your husband. Leave little Charles to my care. Mr. and Mrs. Musgrove cannot think it wrong while I remain with him. Are you serious? Cried Mary, her eyes brightening. Dear me, that is a very good thought, very good indeed. To be sure, I may just as well go as not, for I am no use at home, am I? And it only harasses me. You, who have not a mother's feelings, are a great deal the properest person. You can make little Charles do anything. He always minds you at a word. It will be a great deal better than leaving him only with Jemima. Oh, I will certainly go. I am sure I ought if I can, quite as much as Charles, for they want me excessively to be acquainted with Captain Wentworth, and I know you do not mind being left alone. An excellent thought of yours, indeed, Anne. I will go and tell Charles, and get ready directly. You can send for us, you know, at a moment's notice, if anything is the matter, but I dare say there will be nothing to alarm you. I should not go, you may be sure, if I do not feel quite at ease about my dear child. The next moment she was tapping at her husband's dressing-room door, and, as Anne followed her upstairs, she was in time for the whole conversation, which began with Mary saying in a tone of great exultation, I mean to go with you, Charles, for I am no more use at home than you are. If I were to shut myself up forever with the child, I should not be able to persuade him to do anything he did not like. Anne will stay. Anne undertakes to stay at home and take care of him. It is Anne's own proposal, and so I shall go with you, which will be a great deal better, for I have not dined at the other house since Tuesday. That's very kind of Anne, was her husband's answer, and I shall be very glad to have you go. But it seems rather hard that she should be left at home by herself to nurse our sick child. Right? You guys are horrible parents. I get it that it's not a serious case, but it's just so wrong, you guys. Anne, God bless you, Anne. And Anne is just like saying, this is not a poor Anne incident. Anne just does not want to go and see him. So she's like, don't worry, I will stay home and sacrifice myself and my amusement for the evening by staying with the child. I see what you're doing there, Anne. You are not fooling me. All right. Anne was now at hand to take up her own cause, and the sincerity of her manner being soon sufficient to convince him, where conviction was at least very agreeable, he had no further scruples as to her being left to dine alone, though he still wanted her to join them in the evening, when the child might be at rest for the night, and kindly urged her to let him come and fetch her. But she was quite unpersuadable. I wonder why. And kindly urged her to let him come. And this being the case, she had ere long the pleasure of seeing them set off together in high spirits. They were gone, she hoped, to be happy, however oddly constructed such happiness might seem. Oh my gosh, those two. They were gone, she hoped, to be happy, however oddly constructed such happiness might seem. As for herself, she was left with as many sensations of comfort as were, perhaps, ever likely to be hers. She knew herself to be of the first utility to the child, and what was it to her if Frederick Wentworth were only half a mile distant, making himself agreeable to others? She would have liked to know how he felt as to a meeting, perhaps indifferent, if indifferent could exist under such circumstances. He must be either indifferent or unwilling. Had he wished ever to see her again, he need not have waited till this time. He would have done what she could not, but believed that in his place she should have done long ago, when events had been early giving him the independence which alone had been wanting. So she's thinking like, if he wanted to see me, he would have done so. So Captain Frederick Wentworth basically was kind of like a low-ranked officer, right? That's why they couldn't get married. She's like, well, the moment he became a captain and had his own ship and made his like the beginning of his fortune, he could have easily come and see me if he wanted to. Like, he really could have. His brother was still living in the area, and I was still single. But no, he didn't want to see me. So there's no reason for him to now want to see me now or to seek my acquaintance. Yeah. Okay. Her brother and sister came back delighted with their new acquaintance and their visit in general. There had been music, singing, talking, laughing, all that was most agreeable. Charming manners in Captain Wentworth, no shyness or reserve. They seemed all to know each other perfectly, and he was coming the very next morning to shoot with Charles. He was to come to breakfast, but not at the cottage, though that had been proposed at first. But when he had been pressed to come to the great house instead, and he seemed afraid of being in Mrs. Charles Musgrove's way on account of the child, and therefore somehow, they hardly knew how, it ended in Charles being to meet him to breakfast at his father's. We don't know how, but it had somehow the plans changed from him coming over to have breakfast at Charles and Mary's house to him saying like, now let's have breakfast at the big house, at the parents' house, and then from there we'll go hunting. I wonder why. Yeah, it's strongly implied that he also kind of wants to avoid the meeting or something. Anne understood. Sorry. Anne understood. Why can't I read this? Anne understood it. He wished to avoid seeing her. He had inquired after her, she found, slightly, as might suit a former slight acquaintance, seeming to acknowledge such as she had acknowledged, actuated, perhaps, by the same view of escaping introduction when they were to meet. The morning hours of the cottage were always later than those of the other house, and on the morrow the difference was so great that Mary and Anne were not more than beginning breakfast, when Charles came in to say that they were just setting off, that he was come for his dogs, that his sisters were following with Captain Wentworth. His sisters, meaning to visit Mary and the child, and Captain Wentworth proposing also to wait on her for a few minutes, if not inconvenient. And though Charles had answered for the child's being in no such state as could make it inconvenient, Captain Wentworth would not be satisfied without his running on to give notice. So he basically told him, like, okay, you go to the house, make sure you tell your wife so that in case, like, just to make sure that it doesn't bother her or the sick child or poor Anne who's living with you guys right now. So he sent a warning. Like, it's ridiculous what these two people are doing. It's like, I'm gonna go on to say hello, but please let them know over at your house that I'm coming, because he knows that Anne also needs time to recollect herself, and so nobody knows or nobody gets a gist or a hint of what happened, or that they're not in speaking terms. They're so ridiculous and so funny. Young people in love. Well, they can be very stupid. All right. Well, actually, I don't know if Captain Wentworth is in love, but Anne definitely is still into him. Mary, very much gratified by this attention, was delighted to receive him, while 1,000 feelings rushed on Anne, of which this was the most consoling, that it would soon be over. And it was soon over. In 2 minutes after Charles's preparation, the others appeared. They were in the drawing room. Her eye half met Captain Wentworth's. A bow, a curtsy passed. She heard his voice. He talked to Mary, said all that was right, said something to the Miss Musgroves, enough to mark an easy footing. The room seemed full of persons and voices, but a few minutes ended it. Charles showed himself at the window. All was ready. The visitor had bowed and was gone. The Miss Musgroves were gone too, suddenly resolving to walk to the end of the village with the sportsmen. I thought they were going to go visit the child, huh? The room was cleared, and Anne might finish her breakfast as she could. It's over. It is over, she repeated to herself again and again in nervous gratitude. The worst is over. Mary talked, but she could not attend. She had seen him. They had met. They had been once more in the same room. Soon, however, she began to reason with herself and try to be feeling less. 8 years, almost 8 years had passed since all had been given up. How absurd to be resuming the agitation which such an interval had vanished into distance and indistinctness. What might not 8 years do? Events of every description, changes, alienations, removals, all must be comprised in it, an oblivion of the past. How natural, how certain too. It included nearly a third of her own life. Alas, with all her reasoning, she found that to retentive feelings 8 years may be a little more than nothing. Now, how were his sentiments to be read? Was this like wishing to avoid her? And the next moment she was hating herself for the folly which asked the question. On one other question, which perhaps her utmost wisdom might not have prevented, she was soon spared all suspense. For after the Miss Musgroves had returned and finished their visit at the cottage, she had the spontaneous information from Mary. Captain Wentworth is not very gallant by you, Anne, though he was so attentive to me. Henrietta asked him what he thought of you when they went away, and he said that you were so altered he should not have known you again. Mary had no feelings to make her respect her sisters in a common way, but she was perfectly unsuspicious of being inflicting any peculiar wound. So, yeah, Mary, I see that Noodles of His Game, she says, Mary is damn funny. Yes, she is kind of like the comedic, what do you call it? Yeah, kind of like that role in this book. But Mary is also really like, Mary, she said, like, honestly, Frederick Wentworth, you are a jerk, said that after 8 years, Anne has changed so much that he would not have recognized her. Oh, what a jerk. Oh, man. But Mary, by saying this, she doesn't really understand. She's not aware of the fact that she is hurting Anne's feelings. Altered beyond his knowledge. Anne fully submitted in silent, deep mortification. Poor Anne. Oh my gosh. This is awful, you guys. Because, for a woman, that means that from the time you were in your first bloom to now, that you are a completely different person. And of course, she knows she's no longer a spring chicken. But at least, come on, you don't have to be that blunt, So, altered beyond his knowledge and fully submitted in silent, deep mortification. Doubtless it was so, and she could take no revenge, for he was not altered, or not for the worse. She had already acknowledged it to herself, and she could not think differently. Let him think of her as he would. No, The years which had destroyed her youth and bloom had only given him a more glowing, manly, open look, in no respect lessening his personal advantages. She had seen the same Frederick Wentworth, so altered that he should not have known her again. These were words which could not but dwell with her, yet soon she began to rejoice that she had heard them. They were of sobering tendency. They allayed agitation. They composed and consequently must make her happier. Frederick Wentworth had used such words, or something like them, but without any idea that they would be carried round to her. Ha ha ha! He had thought her wretchedly altered, and in the first moment of appeal had spoken as he felt. He had not forgiven Anne Elliot. Ooh, this is his POV, yeah. He had not forgiven Anne Elliot. She had used him ill, deserted and disappointed him. And worse, she had shown a feebleness of character in doing so, which his own decided, confident temper could not endure. She had given him up to oblige others. It had been the effect of over-persuasion. It had been weakness and timidity. He had been most warmly attached to her. I had never seen a woman since whom he thought her equal. But except from some natural sensation of curiosity, he had no desire of meeting her again. Her power with him was gone forever. It was now his object to marry. He was rich, and being turned on shore, fully intended to settle as soon as he could be properly tempted. Actually looking around, ready to fall in love with all the speed with which a clear head and quick taste could allow. He had a heart for either of the Miss Musgroves, if they could catch it. A heart, in short, for any pleasing young woman who came his way, excepting Anne Elliot. This was his only secret exception, when he said to his sister, in answer to her suppositions, "Yes, here I am, Sophia, quite ready to make a foolish match. Anybody between 15 and 30 may have me for asking. A little beauty, and a few smiles, and a few compliments to the navy, and I am a lost man. Should not this be enough for a sailor, who has had no society among women to make him nice?" He said it, she knew, to be contradicted. His bright, proud eyes spoke the happy conviction that he was nice, and Anne Elliot was not out of his thoughts when he more seriously described the woman he should wish to meet with. A strong mind, with a sweetness of manner, made the first and the last of the description. "This is the woman I want," said he. "Something a little inferior I shall of course put up with, but it must not be much. If I am a fool, I shall be a fool indeed, for I have thought on this subject more than most men." End of chapter. Woohoo! Okay, so he is ready, willing, and able to get married, with the distinct exception of Anne Elliot. He is willing to get married to anybody, or so he says, in public. But in private, in his heart of hearts, he's like, yeah, I have thought about this quite a bit. I know the kind of person I want. I know what I want. I'm not gonna make a foolish leap into I'm not gonna do a foolish match. He's gonna pick, and he's gonna be choosy, and because he thinks he deserves it. Anyway, Teal says, "I think we all know a Mary." Yes, and yes. Mary is the funniest character in this book, honestly. And I love her in all the adaptations, especially I think perhaps the 2006. She's the funniest Mary. The Netflix Mary, she's a little bit more vacant, but she does have some kind of subtly she has some breakthroughs, or one breakthrough that's pretty funny. But other than that, I don't remember any funny bits. The other one, let's see, 1995 Mary. I just loved how she went into hysterics. There's a scene where she goes into hysterics and it's hilarious and I love it. I don't know. That's when the kid fell off the tree, I think. Anyway, so what do you guys think about this reunion with these two people, Anne and Wentworth? I love that they're both, like, Wentworth is kind of like in denial, while Anne is like, yeah, I know that it's hopeless. So she's like, it's hopeless. And he's like, I'm angry and I will be nice to everybody in this world except Anne. Like, he's charming and amiable, but when it comes to Anne, he's like, no. Does not want to be nice, does not want to be civil, wants to avoid, is cold to Anne. Come on, dude. I get it though. I mean, I do get it, but still, how petty could you be? Like, grow up a little, dude. All right, so shall we do another chapter? Let me see. This one took half an hour. It was 12 pages. The next one is 10 pages. I think we could do it. Let me see. Yeah, let's do it. Let's do one more chapter. Red Tempest says her first love is coming back and facing him. And it's time to face him. Yes. Yeah, it's her first and only. This is her first and only love, which makes it even more potent, you guys. I think I heard like a statistic say that the first love, the first heartbreak takes so long. It's so long because it's the first one, right? But as you go on and the amount of time it takes to get over the person is halved or cut by 3 months or something like that. There's like somebody quantified it. But Anne, unfortunately, this was her first love. She wasn't able to find somebody and date somebody on the rebound. She could have married somebody else, but it's, again, Charles. It would not have been it would not have worked. So let's see if it's better for Anne to, like, according to Jane Austen, is it better for Anne to be single and pine after Wentworth forever, or are they going to make a match of it? What do you guys think? Now you guys know that I am all for happily ever after in my books, so we'll see. That's a big hint. All right, let's do chapter 8. Chapter 8. From this time, Captain Wentworth and Anne Elliot were repeatedly in the same circle. They were soon dining in company together at Mr. Musgroves, for the little boy's state could no longer supply his aunt with a pretence for absenting herself, and this was but the beginning of other dinings and other meetings. Whether former feelings were to be renewed must be brought to the proof. Former times must undoubtedly be brought to the recollection of each. They could not but be reverted to. The year of their engagement could not but be named by him in the little narratives or descriptions which conversation called forth. His profession qualified him, his disposition led him to talk, and that was in the year 6. That happened before I went to sea in the year 6. Occurred in the course of the first evening they spent together. And though his voice did not falter, and though she had no reason to suppose his eye wandering towards her while he spoke, Anne felt the utter impossibility, from her knowledge of his mind, that he could be unvisited by the remembrance any more than herself. There must be the same immediate association of thought, though she was very far from conceiving it to be of equal pain. They had no conversation together, no intercourse but what the commonest civility required. Once so much to each other, now nothing. There had been a time when of all the large party now filling the drawing-room at Uppercross, they would have found it most difficult to cease to speak to one another, with the exception perhaps of Admiral and Mrs. Croft, who seemed particularly attached and happy. Anne could allow no other exception, even among the married couples. There could have been no two hearts so open, no tastes so similar, no feelings so in unison, no countenances so beloved. Now they were strangers. Nay, worse than strangers, for they could never become acquainted. It was a perpetual estrangement. When he talked, she heard the same voice and discerned the same mind. There was a very general ignorance of all naval matters throughout the party, and he was very much questioned, and especially by the two Miss Musgroves, who seemed hardly to have any eyes but for him, as to the matter of living on board, daily regulations, food, hours, etc. And their surprise at his accounts, at learning the degree of accommodation and arrangement which was practicable, drew from him some pleasant ridicule, which reminded Anne of the early days when she too had been ignorant, and she too had been accused of supposing sailors to be living on board without anything to eat, or any cook to dress it if there were, or any servant to wait, or any knife and fork to use. From thus listening and thinking, she was roused by a whisper of Mrs. Musgroves, who, overcome by fond regrets, could not help saying, "Ah, Miss Anne, if it had pleased heaven to spare my poor son, I would dare say he would have been just such another by this time." Anne suppressed a smile and listened kindly. Oh yeah, you guys remember Mrs. Musgrove used to have a son who was very good-for-nothing son. His name was Richard, but they all called him Dick. and he was actually a sailor under Captain Wentworth at some point. So, anyway, but the only person in the world that actually misses Richard and who's sorry that Richard is dead is his mother. Anne suppressed a smile and listened kindly, while Mrs. Musgrove relieved her heart a little more, and for a few minutes, therefore, could not keep pace with the conversation of the others. Once she could let her attention take its natural course again, she found the Miss Musgroves just fetching the Navy list, their own Navy list, the first that had ever been at Uppercross, and sitting down together to pore over it, with the professed view of finding out the ships which Captain Wentworth had commanded. Your first was the Asp, I remember. We will look for the Asp." "You will not find her there. Quite worn out and broken up. I was the last man who commanded her. Hardly fit for service then. Reported fit for home service for a year or two, and so I was sent off to the West Indies." The girls looked all amazement. "The Admiralty," he continued, "entertained themselves now and then with sending a few hundred men to sea, in a ship not fit to be employed. But they have a great many to provide for, and among the thousands that may just as well go to the bottom as not, it is impossible for them to distinguish the very set who may be least missed." "Pooh, pooh," cried the Admiral. "What stuff these young fellows talk! There never was a better sloop than the Asp in her day. For an old-built sloop you could not see her equal. Lucky fellow to get her. He knows there must have been 20 better men than himself applying for her at the same time. Lucky fellow to get anything so soon, with no more interest than his." "I felt my luck, Admiral, I assure you," replied Captain Wentworth seriously. "I was as well satisfied with my appointment as you can desire. It was a great object with me at that time to be at sea. A very great object. I wanted to be doing something." "To be sure you did. What should a young fellow like you do ashore for half a year altogether? If a man has not a wife, he soon wants to be afloat again." I wonder why Frederick Wentworth was very eager to be at sea. "But, Captain Wentworth," cried Louisa, "how vexed you must have been when you came to the Asp to see what an old thing they had given you." "I knew pretty well what she was before that day," said he, smiling. "I had no more discoveries to make than you would have as to the fashion and strength of any old pelisse. which you had seen lent about half your acquaintance ever since you could remember, and which at last on some wet day is lent to yourself. Ah, she was a dear old asp to me. She did all that I wanted. I knew she would. I knew that we should either go to the bottom together, or that she would be the making of me. And I never had 2 years of foul weather all the time I was at sea in her. And after taking privateers enough to be very entertaining, I had the good luck in my passage home the next autumn to fall in with the very French frigate I wanted. I brought her into Plymouth, and here another instance of luck. We had not been 6 hours in the Sound when a gale came on, which lasted 4 days and nights, and which would have done my poor old asp in half the time. Our touch with the great nation not having much improved our condition. 24 hours later, I should only have been gallant Captain Wentworth, and a small paragraph at one corner of the newspapers, and being lost in only a sloop, nobody would have thought about me. Anne's shudderings were to herself alone, but the Miss Musgroves could be as open as they were sincere in their exclamations of pity and horror. "And so, then, I suppose," said Mrs. Musgrove in a low voice, as if thinking aloud, "so then he went away to the Laconia, and there he met with our poor boy. Charles, my dear," beckoning him to her, "do ask Captain Wentworth where was he first met with your poor brother. I always forget." "It was at Gibraltar, mother. I know. Dick had been left ill at Gibraltar with a recommendation from his former captain to Captain Wentworth." "Oh, but Charles, tell Captain Wentworth he need not be afraid of mentioning poor Dick before me, for it would rather be a pleasure to hear him talked of by such a good friend." Ah. Charles, being somewhat more mindful of the probabilities of the case, only nodded in reply and walked away. The girls were now hunting for the Laconia, and Captain Wentworth could not deny himself the pleasure of taking the precious volume into his own hands to save them the trouble, and once more read aloud the little statement of her name and rate, the present non-commissioned class, observing over it that she too had been one of the best friends man ever had. Ah, those were pleasant days when I had the Laconia. How fast I made money in her! A friend of mine and I had such a lovely cruise together off the Western Islands. Poor Harville's sister. You know how much he wanted money, worse than myself. He had a wife. Excellent fellow. I shall never forget his happiness. He felt it all so much for her sake. I wished for him again the next summer, when I still had the same luck in the Mediterranean." "And I am sure, sir," said Mrs. Musgrove, "it was a lucky day for us, when you were put captain into that ship. We shall never forget what you did." Her feelings made her speak low, and Captain Wentworth, hearing only in part, and probably not having Dick Musgrove at all near his thoughts, looked rather in suspense, as if waiting for more. "My brother," whispered one of the girls. "Mamma is thinking of poor Richard." "Poor dear fellow," continued Mrs. Musgrove. "He was grown so steady, and such an excellent correspondent while he was under your care. Ha! But it was because he was forcing Dick to write to his mother. Ah, it would have been a happy thing if he had never left you. I assure you, Captain Wentworth, we are very sorry he ever left you." There was a momentary expression in Captain Wentworth's face at this speech, a certain glance of his bright eye, and a curl of his handsome mouth, which convinced Anne that instead of sharing Mrs. Musgrove's kind wishes as to her son, he had probably been at some pains to get rid of him. But it was too transient an indulgence of self-amusement to be detected by any who understood him less than herself. In another moment he was perfectly collected and serious, and almost instantly afterwards coming up to the sofa, on which she and Miss Musgrove were sitting, took a place by the latter, and entered into conversation with her in a low voice about her son, doing it with so much sympathy and natural grace as showed the kindest consideration for all that was real and unabsurd in the parents' feelings. They were actually on the same sofa. Oh my gosh, can you? We know he sits in the same sofa as you. You don't need to point it out. Oh my gosh, we're sitting in the same sofa. Okay. For Mrs. Musgrove had most readily made room for him. They were divided only by Mrs. Musgrove. And I get it. Like, if you, it's like when you have a crush, like your first high school crush, you're like, oh my gosh, I'm sitting only 2 rows away from my crush in the school bus or something like that. Or like, oh my gosh, my crush is sitting 2 rows ahead of me in class or whatever. I guess it tracks, but she's Anne, just chill, girl. It's hopeless. Anyway, but it does make sense that there's so much consciousness about the other person. It was no significant barrier, indeed. Mrs. Musgrove was of comfortable, substantial size, infinitely more fitted by nature to express good cheer and good humor than tenderness and sentiment. And while the agitations of Anne's slender form and pensive face may be considered as very completely screened, Captain Wentworth should be allowed some credit for the self-command with which he attended to her large fat sighings over the destiny of a son whom nobody alive had cared for. Personal size and mental sorrow have certainly no necessary proportions. A large bulky figure has as good a right to be in deep affliction as the most graceful set of limbs in the world. But, fair or not fair, there are unbecoming conjunctions which reason will patronize in vain, which taste cannot tolerate, which ridicule will seize. Hello, little butterfly. Thanks for hopping in. The Admiral, after taking 2 or 3 refreshing turns about the room with his hands behind him, being called to order by his wife, now came up to Captain Wentworth, and without any observation of what he might be interrupting, thinking only of his own thoughts, began with, "If you had been a week later at Lisbon last spring, Frederick, you would have been asked to give passage to a Lady Grierson and her daughters." "Should I? I'm glad I was not a week later then." The Admiral abused him for his want of gallantry. He defended himself, though professing that he would never willingly admit any ladies on board of a ship of his, excepting for a ball or a visit, which a few hours might comprehend. "But, if I know myself, this is from no want of gallantry towards them. It is rather from feeling how impossible it is, with all one's efforts and all one's sacrifices, to make the accommodations on board such as women ought to have. There can be no want of gallantry, Admiral, in rating the claims of women to every personal comfort high. And this is what I do. I hate to hear of women on board, or to see them on board, and no ship under my command shall ever convey a family of ladies anywhere, if I can help it." This brought his sister upon him. "Oh, Frederick, I cannot believe it of you. All idle refinement. When they may be as comfortable on board as in the best house in England. I believe I have lived as much on board as most women, and I know nothing superior to the accommodations of a man of war. I declare I have not a comfort or an indulgence about me, even at Kellynch Hall," with a kind bow to Anne, "beyond what I always had in most of the ships I have lived in, and they have been 5 altogether." "Nothing to the purpose," replied her brother. "You were living with your husband, and were the only woman on board." "But you yourself brought Mrs. Harville, her sister, her cousin, and the 3 children round from Portsmouth to Plymouth. Where was the superfine, extraordinary sort of gallantry of yours then?" "All merged in my friendship, Sophia. I could assist any brother of officer's wife that I could, and I would bring anything of Harville's from the world's end if he wanted it. But do not imagine that I did not feel it an evil in itself." "Depend on it, they were all perfectly comfortable." I might not like them the better for that, perhaps. Such a number of women and children have no right to be comfortable on board. My dear Frederick, you're talking quite idly. Pray, what would become of us poor sailors' wives, who often want to be conveyed to one port or another after our husbands, if everybody had your feelings? My feelings, you see, did not prevent my taking Mrs. Harville and all her family to Plymouth. But I hate to hear you talking so like a fine gentleman, and as if women were all fine ladies instead of rational creatures. We none of us expect to be in smooth water all our days. Ah, my dear, said the Admiral, when he has got a wife, he will sing a different tune. When he is married, if we have the good luck to live to another war, we shall see him do as you and I, and a great many others have done. We shall have him very thankful to anybody that will bring him his wife. Aye, that he shall. Now I have done, cried Captain Wentworth. When once married people begin to attack me with, oh, you will think very differently when you're married, I can only say, no, I shall not. And when they say again, yes, you will, and then there is the end of it. He got up and moved away. What a great traveller you must have been, ma'am, said Mrs. Musgrove to Mrs. Croft. Pretty well, ma'am. In the 15 years of my marriage, though many women have done more. I have crossed the Atlantic 4 times. I have been once to the East Indies and back again, and only once, besides being in different places about home, Cork and Lisbon and Gibraltar. But I never went beyond the Straits, and never was in the West Indies. We do not call Bermuda or Bahama, you know, the West Indies. Mrs. Musgrove had not a word to say in dissent. She could not accuse herself of having ever called them anything in the whole course of her life. And I do assure you, ma'am, pursued Mrs. Croft, that nothing can exceed the accommodations of a man of war. I speak, you know, of the higher rates. When you come to a frigate, of course, you are more confined, though any reasonable woman may be perfectly happy in one of them. And I can safely say that the happiest part of my life has been spent aboard a ship. While we were together, you know, there was nothing to be feared. Thank God, I have always been blessed with excellent health, and no climate disagrees with me. A little disordered, always the first 24 hours of going to sea, but never knew what sickness was afterwards. The only time I ever really suffered in body or mind, the only time that I ever fancied myself unwell or had any ideas of danger, was the winter that I had passed by myself at Deal, when the Admiral, Captain Croft then, was in the North Seas. I lived in perpetual fright at that time, and had a manner of imaginary complaints from not knowing what to do with myself, or when I should hear from him next. But as long as we could be together, nothing ever ailed me, and I never met with the smallest inconvenience. Ah, to be sure. Yes, indeed. Oh, yes, I am quite of your opinion, Mrs. Croft, was Mrs. Musgrove's hearty answer. There is nothing so bad as a separation. I am quite of your opinion. I know what it is, for Mr. Musgrove always attends the assizes, and I am so glad when they are over and he is back safe again. The evening ended with dancing. On its being proposed, Anne offered her services as usual, and though her eyes would sometimes fill with tears as she sat at the instrument, she was extremely glad to be employed, and desired nothing in return but to be unobserved. It was a merry, joyous party, and no one seemed in higher spirits than the Captain Wentworth. She felt that he had everything to elevate him, which general attention and deference, and especially the attention of all young women, could do. The Miss Hayters, the females of the family of cousins already mentioned, were apparently admitted to the honor of being in love with him, and as for Henrietta and Louisa, they both seemed so entirely occupied by him that nothing but the continued appearance of the most perfect goodwill between themselves could have made it credible that they were not decided rivals. If he were a little spoiled by such universal, such eager admiration, who could wonder? These were some of the thoughts which occupied Anne while her fingers were mechanically at work, proceeding for half an hour together, equally without error and without consciousness. Once she felt that he was looking at herself, observing her altered features perhaps, trying to trace in them the ruins of the face which had once charmed him. And once she knew that he must have spoken of her. She was hardly aware of it till she heard the answer. But when she was sure of his having asked his partner whether Miss Elliot never danced, the answer was, "Oh no, never. She has quite given up dancing. She had rather play. She is never tired of playing." Once, too, he spoke to her. She had left the instrument of the dancing. She had left the instrument on the dancing being over, and he had sat down to try to make out an air which he wished to give the Miss Musgroves an idea of. Unintentionally, she returned to that part of the room. He saw her, and, instantly rising, said with studied politeness, "I beg your pardon, madam. This is your seat." "Ah, madam! Madam, she's not old and she's not married. Do not call her madam." I guess it's politeness. Would it hurt you to have called her miss? "Ah, I beg your pardon, madam. This is your seat." And though she immediately drew back with a decided negative, he was not to be induced to sit down again. Anne did not wish for more of such looks and speeches. His cold politeness, his ceremonious grace, were worse than anything. End of chapter. Well, how's this for a complicated situation between these two? How dare you call me Madam Magpie Crusher? Respect your magpie. It's okay. I don't mind. Well, personally, I don't mind. It's just another word. But, a lot of women of my acquaintance, if you call, okay, you go to, ma'am, if you go to the store and the person calls you ma'am, I've been with several friends and they're like, "How dare this person call me ma'am? I'm not old." I'm just like, whatever. But I mean, he knows she's not married. He could have called her Miss. How about Miss Elliot? I mean, but no. By the way, Crusher, hello, welcome. What did you miss? You missed quite a bit. Also, Time Lord Boy says hello. Hi there. So you guys got here a little bit late. We read 2 chapters, chapter 7 and 8. I hope you enjoy the replay. So far, it's just us seeing how Anne and Wentworth first reunited. They basically tried to do a little dance around each other to kind of avoid each other, but they could only avoid each other so long. And then they just, when they had to meet, when they were forced to meet, it was a short meeting, and afterwards they just studied politeness, and they avoid talking to each other. Anne is continually just conscious of him, hyper conscious, if I may say so. And I think he's giving off like a studied indifference. Like he's just pretending that he's indifferent. That's my take on this. Like he seems like some of the things he says or whatever kind of are aimed towards her, but not really, because he's supposed to be indifferent. And again, he is very angry. He's still resentful of the fact that she gave him up so many years ago. Senora Magpie. You know what? Senora does irk me, so don't do that. You can call me Madam Magpie. Senora Magpie, nah. No, because that's the name that they give my mother. Please don't call me that. I will have to put my foot down. I just now that I see it together, it's like, no, I don't like it. I don't like it. It'll burn it. I am Madam Magpie, Miss Magpie, Señorita Magpie, Lady Magpie, not Señora, definitely not Doña Magpie. So I hope you guys enjoyed today's read along. I certainly did. Don't worry, you guys, we are going to continue on Wednesday. I don't see that unless the sky falls down and I don't know, something major happens here on my side of the world. I think we're good to go for Wednesday morning. So again, same time, same place. Yeah, so what do you guys think about Wentworth and Anne? Just give me your thoughts. I want to hear all of your thoughts, all of your impressions about these two. What parts did you find ridiculous? What parts did you find sad? There are some lines there that are really poignant, and so I feel sorry for poor Anne. Like, I get it. The poor dear, she's just trying to move on and live her life. She has already resigned herself. She's absolutely resigned. She just wants to live in peace and to not reawaken or rekindle feelings. Just trying to be very careful, for which we appreciate the fact that Wentworth is keeping his distance. But if he could just dial down the anger and the resentment and the indirect, we would really appreciate that. Yes, you can call me Magpie Sama, Teal. That's beautiful. Yes, Magpie Sama is accepted. Crusher, you're in danger of being struck down. I don't know how I'm gonna do it, but I can strike you down here. I don't know, what was the poor Anne counter? Nobody counted it. I guess today there was no counter, unfortunately. I tried to not go overboard, but I did say it sometimes. So I don't know. I didn't count it, you guys. I didn't count it. So, and there were also the poor childs from the kid that fell off and dislocated his collarbone. Which, by the way, ouchie, that must have been incredibly painful. Owie. Anyway, so I'll see you guys on Wednesday, or if you are a pre-pub, I will see you then on Tuesday for our weekly pre-pub chit-chat, which I am so looking forward to, and it'll be amazing. It's going to be number 6, I believe. 6, 7, 8. Yes, number 6. So until then, just want to say thank you to all of you guys for joining me, and for Replay Gang, also thank you for listening. Hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. I'll see you on Tuesday or Wednesday. Until next time, take care. Bye bye.